It is also at the beginning. So we record the first half or a bit more of this session. And at some point we'll switch it off that we have a bit of off-record time. So also to make it worthwhile to join into the discussion. Today we welcome Eva Wolfangel. She is a journalist and became yesterday news herself. So we'll talk about this. So I saw it, and so we are probably sort of one of the first shows to have you on. So Eva was named yesterday. She got a German prize for journalism, quite a prestigious one. So best, Wissensreportage, it's the German term. It's basically writing a piece of journalism that's sort of where you investigate on science and knowledge. I think it's hard to translate, and I think they didn't translate it themselves. So I think first a round of applause, and then we also find the applause symbol to do that. So I think
that's great.
We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
I think I start with right away in there. I think sort of tell us a little bit about what the story was you got the prize for, because this is sort of was also our first question in it. Tell a little bit about the story you wrote, how this links to us being happy.
Yeah, that's the story that really made me happy already when I did the research. So I came more or less by coincidence. I found out that there's social virtual reality. So it's not about games or a single experience you have in VR. It's about meeting other people. Of course, you see them as avatars. And when I heard about that, I was sure that this must be something that will change our future. And so I spent a lot of time, I think it was already 3 or 4 years ago when I started with that. I spent a lot of time in social virtual reality. Back then, and still today, what I like most is a meeting space called Altspace VR. And I met many really interesting people there. And I found out over the time I was hanging around with people that many people seem to live there. So I often came, of course, in the evenings. Sometimes I came very early in the morning because I wanted to meet people from the West Coast as well, and they were there in their evenings. And some people were just always there when I was there, and I felt like they lived there. So I found some friends. One of them is Sana. She's a woman, a widow from Kuwait City. And she always seemed to be a bit sad. And that made me, of course, curious. And I wanted to know more about her. And from the beginning, we had a really nice relationship. We were really open towards each other. I was able to ask all kinds of questions about her religion, for example, really open. And we discussed for nights on her. She had a fireplace in her. She had built her own room in Altspace VR, where she had a fireplace, and we sat there for nights and discussed about religion and education and VR, of course, and everything. Yeah, and over the time, my friends and family said things like, "Oh, Eva, you shouldn't go to VR so much. This is the internet, that's dangerous. These people are strange. They maybe pretend to be who they aren't." And I always said no, because I know them very well, because I heard Sana's voice, and I really found out that, via the voice, you can find out so much about emotions of someone or about a person. And you see how they move their heads and their hands and things like that. And I felt like I know really a lot of these people. And so I felt like I have to do the research, or to move this research to their real lives, just to prove my friends and family and colleagues that these people are real, and that I know who they are, and that they are the same in their real lives as I knew them already from VR. So, and then I visited them. She was in Kuwait City, another one was in Atlanta, one was in Spokane, and one was in Jerusalem. And I just visited them and found out that, yes, I knew them, and they were how I thought. Of course, they were looking differently. I hadn't seen them before with their real faces, only with their avatars. But when Sana hugged me in real life, and she had hugged me already in virtual reality, and this was, again, something that made me really curious about this new reality, because she hugged me in VR, and I could feel how she was hugging me. I could feel her hands, and I could feel her breath a bit on my neck. Yeah, and then she hugged me in real life, and it felt just really familiar. And I heard her voice then near my ear when she was talking to me. And it felt like we are. So, and this is more or less the story. And then, of course, I found out that she's a really lonely person in Kuwait City. She's a widow, as I said, and as a Muslim woman, she told me she's not allowed to meet other men, and it's hard for her to go out and leave her house. And I think she has a bit of social anxiety as well, and maybe a depression. So she always feels that people don't like her, and that she doesn't feel good if people are around her. Only in social VR, she felt she can have a social life. So she had many friends there, but no friends in real life. And that was just really interesting to see that this was such a great solution for her to have a real social life in virtual reality. So that was a long answer, but it was a long story as well. So sorry, it takes some time.
But I think worthwhile to listen to, because I think it has some of these issues. I think one of the questions, I think we very often say people are not who they are on the internet. And I think, is there a difference between on the internet, which is basically in a chat room, versus in social VR or in virtual reality? Because I think the virtual reality, does it give a different quality to meeting people than if you would meet them in a chat room?
Yeah, totally. So I don't have fun at all using chat rooms or texting. So I do texting, of course, if there's a message I need to get out. But to stay in contact with friends who don't live near myself, I really don't like all those communication things like texting, emailing, not even a phone call. Even a phone call is completely different. So I felt in VR, as I said, you have so many information about a person, because you can, I think the most important thing is the voice, because that already helps. It's not possible to pretend to be someone completely different, because I think you would hear it in the voice. And then of course you have all this, how someone is moving, and and then of course you have the spatial feeling, exploring things together, doing games together, meeting a group of people in a room in VR around a fire or whatever. And that really feels much more like real life than chatting or having a phone call or something.
Okay, I just jump in. So as I told you, I watched quite a few talks of you, which most are at your website. So at your Otherland talk, you describe also how to not make the good experience. Like, I think if we start with a new medium, we usually copy it, from something we know. Like, first websites looked like newspapers, and now they obviously look different. And so the questions I think our community is still learning about, like, how to make a good VR experience. How could we now meet, not using Zoom, but the VR space? And we used, some of us used TriCat last week to meet with the EMBF. Maybe you have been there, I don't know. And it's still a bit like, the avatars talk when some noise is around, so they behave a bit awkward, but we have our voices. So what do you think, makes old VR, for example, so immersive, and what enables you to make friends there? What is the recipe, of designing?
I just think about where to start. There's so much to say about that. So I was at a VR conference in April at this classical big VR conference, which should have been held in Atlanta, I guess. And I think really important is that you are able to walk around. So before that I had many VR experiences where people try to copy real life in VR, for example, like talk shows. So I was researching out about VR or journalism in VR. And there's not much. There are some experiences, but not these interactive things are really rare. And what I found is, for example, a talk show where you can just join by sitting on your place and watching people interacting in front of you. And this is something I really don't want to use VR for, because this is this is much more convenient just to sit in front of a TV. If it's because there's nothing, so the VR added nothing to that experience besides a headset, which is really heavy and not very comfortable. Or I did research around learning in virtual reality, because of course right now schools sometimes are really desperate trying to get their students together and having them experience like something like a social situation. But I found school or education experiences where people just build like a classroom. So you go in and you sit on your table and the teacher is standing in front of you. And this is really old pedagogy in addition, right? This idea that someone is standing in front of you and just talking to you. And I think we should really think about what else we can use, what VR offers. Like, for example, I did a project in my fellowship at MIT where I was as a science journalist until June this year, where we tried to explain quantum physics to people. So this was like, I had an expert with me and I was interviewing him and he explained quantum physics, and we explored these things. So we built like Schrödinger's box, so a box where you could watch what happens if you have two atoms and the superposition. So they don't, the electrons don't know where they don't know. This is how they explain it. Don't know where they are, but as soon as you open the box, they decide where they are. And in real life and in the laboratories of the physicists, there's no chance to measure this without disturbing the experiment. And in VR, of course, you can see how would it be if the box is closed and you still can watch through it, and then you can open it officially and then you can see what happens. So that I thought that helped people a lot to understand quantum physics, superposition and things like that. And of course, nobody had to sit on a space without moving. So you could walk around, you could explore things, you could open the box, you could make the electron bigger and things like that. And we could even beam to other planets and see what happens then and things like that. So I think we need much more creativity, but of course, this is always the case if there's a new medium that the first thing is we try to copy what we already know. I think it helps to be
already
creative.
you answered my next question.
Oh, sorry.
No.
But I think there are much more
follow up on. So you said that we can have like magic skills and look into Schröder's box, and we can, in a meeting, we also could look into other rooms with a kind of laser eye, or here into other rooms. So we have new possibilities, and you also say we can do research in VR, but then if we learn something in VR, having like super skills, we have results which not apply to our real, world. So I don't know, like I really find it exciting to have a new world that allows us to do things that we cannot do. So what's your feeling about this parallel reality of which we probably have multiple in the next years?
So I think you cannot do physics research, of course, in VR because physics are different, or they depends on how you implement physics in VR, of course. What I see is, of course, many psychological experiments and things like that. Of course, that works because you can build worlds that maybe are not that available in the real world, but similar enough, or things like that. Or you can just use some of the features of real world in VR. Now I forgot your question.
It's a bit like, like you also talked about, you met the founder of Second Life, and he said that we will have multiple realities. And my question is, these are three questions in one. Like, we have multiple realities, we can have super skills in VR. We as HCI community could, in theory, have user studies in VR, but then again, we have to stick, so like, what do you think in 5 years, how strong, how much are we living in a virtual reality? Will we work in VR, or, what do you think is the future of these realities? Will they be helpful for psychology, for HCI, or more a private, entertainment place? Because probably we do not want to travel anymore. We just go into VR.
So I see a big potential for example, psychology and treatment of disorders. I did a big research around PTSD and VR, and this is something they really are optimistic about, and they have really good experiences, because in PTSD treatment, it's important to build the traumatic experience, to rebuild it and to relive it. And this is something therapists told me is often hard for them, because it's often not possible to rebuild or to have them. So you have to really imagine how the situation was, and it helped many people to relive the situations using VR, and then you could even adapt it, of course, to the situation. So someone is maybe stable seeing the world how it was back then when he or she was traumatized, but now stable to have the sounds of that world or the other people. And so you could make it stronger and stronger over the period of time where the person gets stronger, him or herself. So I think this is a big thing. And you as HCI community, of course, I think you can do psychological experiments as well, because psychology is really important for you. And when it comes to Philip Rosedale, who is the founder of Second Life, and he is really optimistic about VR, and he's dreaming about this space between the computers, or how he told me since he's a teenager. And he said he thinks we will be living in different realities and just go back if we want to eat something, because he thinks maybe eating won't be solved in VR. I'm not sure about that, because I still love the real world as well. But right now, I see that there are situations where VR really could help us to meet each other kind of in person together in a room and explore things together and just have social interactions. And when I talked about this yesterday at the celebration for this journalism award I received, I really saw that people were much more open towards the idea, because everybody's missing to meet people and to hug people right now. And this is something we can do in VR, I think, second best after real life.
I think let me just step in here. So I think second best, and I think Katrin already had this point. I think so. What we see at the moment, we can pace much faster our lives. I think this is probably a lot of us have experienced this. So I can do more meetings than I could ever have done. So I typically, if I look at my work week with regard to meetings, I can do many more meetings than I could do before. So I can pack my time much faster. And I think probably some people are better at sort of saying no to things. But so I think we see this, that there is a chance to pack more and more in. And I think this, and what I realized sort of living in Munich, cycling from the university main building back to the office, 15 minutes through nice places is something that's sort of winding me down. I think this is sort of extremely helpful for me. Similarly, when I travel to a conference, I usually try to not read scientific papers on the plane. I try to read sort of just a fiction book, just to basically not sort of fill up my time too much. And I think at the moment we're losing these slack time, and some people said, oh, it's great, we can sort of even exploit ourselves more. But I would be sort of now at this point, that we can pack much harder. The second point is, I think most of us are not good juggling multiple reality at once. And I think those who have children at home and work at home, I think who is overriding what. So I feel I should attend this, I should attend this. As Katrin said, we can have now multiple realities just basically by turning our head in VR. So I can have sort of one conference here, another conference there. And so the question is, how do we create a reality which we can manage, where we can really sort of, and taking a bit to the future, where it gets harder and harder to discriminate what's real and what's not real. So not taking the current technology, taking this further. And so I'm in a way a bit worried that this sort of maybe a technology that is really pushing evolution into a direction which we may regret some years later.
Honestly, I think that VR can help with that, because I have the same experience as you. Right now I go to conferences and I just check the program and I go to this talk and to that talk, and then maybe it becomes boring, and then I just move to another one, and then there's a meeting, and then, yeah, so it gets much more intense and much more packed and much more superficial partly as well, right? Because you quickly just move away and don't wait maybe for an interesting discussion after a talk or something like that. And I feel that VR can help with that, because as soon as you use a headset and are really in another space, it's not possible anymore to do this, to do multitasking or quickly write an email parallel to a conference talk, and then you miss the whole talk. This is what I experience a lot, and I feel like people, including me, don't learn of that. It just happens, and you think, oh, it's possible. I just quickly do this email, and then you wake up and see, oh no, I missed half of the talk. And and I think this is something where VR can help. And of course, I think real life is still the best, and I can't wait to go to conferences in person again and have to this random talks in between. But again, this is something that if we can make it without real life, with technology, VR, I think, is the only solution to make these interactions possible, to have like a poster session at the IEEE VR conference. There was this poster session, and that really convinced me that conferencing during the pandemic is best in VR, because then you can walk around, and then you heard over there someone is talking about this topic that's really interesting, and then I just go there and join the group or walk to the other side of the room and just by coincidence meet someone I know and have a talk. And these are things that don't happen on Zoom because it's just not possible. So I think this could be a solution as well.
I think this coincidence is something I basically, by preparing for tonight, I tried to figure out when we met the first time, and I think it was random. And I think it was random because we were in the same place in a way. So in Stuttgart.
Augmented Human conference, right? Or
yeah, it was a conference, but it was really fairly random. I think this is sort of, and you were sort of there because you were there for a newspaper. So it was basically, there was a lot of randomness. And I think if I look back in my life, most things that matter in the long term are basically not the planned thing. They're very much the random things that just happened, running into the right person, being asked by a person about something, etc. So just sort of these things. And now the question is, I haven't seen any tool at the moment that does this. We had yesterday GatherTown for our Open Lab Day, and I think it's a big effort to set it up. It theoretically worked, but practically it was not really sort of an experience comparable in any way to the real thing. So what do you think, what are we missing? And again, this as a research community, what are we missing in order to create this serendipity that we really get sort of these things which are not planned, that we get sort of this one-on-one things which are not sort of randomly imposed, but which are just happening? Because I think we as humans may have in the real world a feel who I'm going to talk to. It's not that I talk to a random person. Typically it's somebody I spot and I talk to because I have some sort of, whatever antenna to do that. So what is it missing? And is there a fundamental problem, or do you see solutions ahead?
So I had something similar with Sophia AI, which is like GatherTown, I think. And I think this is a bit more like this, but what I still was missing is, so you see yourself from above, and I think that's like GatherTown, right? You see yourself from above walking around, and if you meet someone, your camera opens up. And what I really think is missing there, it's much better than Zoom because you have a bit more randomness in who you meet. But what is missing is really the spatial sound and the real spatial experience. So at this IEEE VR conference, I really felt like this is near to a real conference because, for example, I met someone in front of a poster at the poster session, and then I had some questions and someone else joined, and then this other person said, oh, if you're interested in this topic, let me introduce you to my colleague over there, just come with me. And then I walked through the room and talked to someone else. So this was a bit like when we met first at this Augmented Human conference, that someone introduces you to someone else just because they see you by coincidence at the same time in the same room. And I really would love to see more conferences like this. And that was happened in Mozilla Hubs, which is, I think, great for that. So I know that, of course, the people behind the IEEE conference had a lot of work, and they're working the nights, I think many nights before the conference happened. So I guess it's a lot of work, but yeah, organizing a real conference is a lot of work as well, right? And they were really happy afterwards. And I felt like really, everybody was so relieved to have, after the first few weeks of lockdown, and this was really, I think, in April or May, that was really early. And already back then, everybody was so relieved to have a real conference experience again and not only Zoom anymore. And of course, the best thing is to have the real life back, but I think this is, as I said, the second best option and not too bad.
I have another question on like VR bots or social bots that you also maybe experienced but also talked about. So you.
Oh, I don't hear you. Can you hear me?
So I think yeah,
missed
Catherine's internet
Catherine.
is gone, so I take over, try to complete the sentence. I think it's a funny game. So I think the question of social bots, and I think at the beginning you said if we meet people in VR, they are like in VR, but Catherine is back.
Yeah.
Just I haven't finished your question. I just rephrased what you said so far, so you can finish your sentence.
I will never know. If people lack social, like if people lack friends and go online and find friends, you know, what is different from a real friend or an artificial friend? And is it important if there's a real person? What do you think?
Wow, that's a hard question. So I think it matters, of course, although you could argue. Yeah, that's a good question. To me, it was always important to know that there are real people behind that avatars, because I think empathy and all these things are just uniquely human, and I would like to have friends who are human. But of course, I know the discussion about sex robots, for example, and where people say I fell in love with that robot and I'm happy with that, and I don't want to be the person to tell those people you are wrong or that's not okay. But I think what I think is important that in future that we always make it clear if there are robots or an AI behind an avatar.
But I think because I find this sort of it is really an important question here. If I now basically I record everybody in VR for a year, and I have enough snippets of real human behavior, and I train a neural network that I create exactly the person who you find sort of attractive, where you like the empathy that person is showing, and there is sort of in sort of a lot in the graphical world where they create faces of people that don't exist. So I think we can go to so I can create exactly the person you can be empathic with, and obviously this person is a mix of perhaps 1 million person, of 10 million persons. So it is sort of in a way created on the sort of virtual DNA of all of those people. So basically, where is the border? Does it have the person in real time? Can I have it? Can it be a person that's dead and recorded? Was this okay? I think we had this discussion in one before. So where is the border? And I think this is sort of for me a very fundamental question. And for me, I think if we believe that VR gives us the social experience, I would say we should ignore whether it's a human or a not human. And this is basically turning our world upside down.
Yeah, it's completely. And then we could, of course, do the same with robots who, of course, in the future can look like humans as well. And we meet them on the streets. And there was this idea that people can, so if someone dies, you could just make this person alive again in VR or just maybe with a phone call or something. And I think that's scary. But of course, it's a philosophical question as well. The question is there anything more about us than our brain doing some math in the end? But yeah, and I had this discussion quite a lot when I was at MIT, because there's philosophy and neuroscience and working so closely together. And yeah, there as well, I ended up in not being able to tell why. But I feel that there is a difference. We are not computers. There is something more. And for me, it's just really important to know that this is a real person. And of course, there's another argument for if AI, if we build people based on AI, there will never happen something new, right? Because AI is always learning on pattern from the past. And so in the end, in the big picture, nothing will change. There will be no evolution or no new thoughts and things like that. And I think this is frustrating as well, because if I discuss something with a friend, I want them to be open and maybe to change, or there's always changing something, right? Maybe you don't change your mind, but your thoughts are changing, your perspective is changing.
This is a matter of programming. I don't know if Albrecht watched Ex Machina, but the movie builds exactly what Albrecht describes. And there's an AI built on what people are thinking about, what they're wondering about. And so it's the perfect, intelligent friend, you know, which is more curious than any person could be. Yeah, so I don't know. I think,
and I think sort of you could build it in a way that it really challenges you to the right level, not above, that it opens your thinking the right level, that you're not turning out. So I think this is sort of, and it as we have seen in the chat, there's a lot in sort of in fiction about this. And I think looking at things like deep fakes we have seen now for videos, but it's very clear that we could use GANs, these types of networks that basically play against each other in order to create something new, that we could in the medium term use this to create characters, to create avatars. So, but I think let's move this a little bit away, and I think Katrin had
to
one
meet for a beer later.
Katrin had one on digital health.
Yeah, I think like I saw, of course, like another talk of you, Eva. You were organizing and moderating the hot topic on digital health, and as our conversation is also on what can we do to increase health and to make people like feel better. What do you think can social VR do to make people mentally healthier and feel better?
So I partly said this already, but I think this psychotherapy is a big thing in VR. So PTSD treatment is already happening. I think that's not even only research. I think they really already use it. And therapy for social anxiety, I think, is a big thing as well, because this was the problem of some of my protagonists, that they felt shy is maybe too weak, but they couldn't speak to people in their real lives because they were social anxious and they were panicked then. And they said meeting people in VR is possible, and they could train that in VR. And they told me they even became better in their real lives to meet with people just because of this training. So I think this helps a lot. People who are lonely can meet others in VR. Another protagonist of my story was fatally ill, and he just his body didn't function anymore, so he wasn't able to travel or to meet friends outside, or so it helped him a lot just to be able to be at home and meeting people. And in VR he could run and fly and beam and do whatever he wanted to do. I think for those things VR is great.
I think like loneliness especially is like a huge problem for elderly people. Do you have experience, or did you learn of VR experiences where elderly people went into social VR, or is there still this age, barrier that it's a young people thing?
Oh, there's a great. I think in Europe it's the case, right? That elderly people don't use VR just because you don't do that if you're old, but this can change. And when I was in Japan for research about human augmentation, I saw a great example about a grandma who wanted to go to what's the word? The marriage of her grandchild. So her grandson had been living with her all his life, and then he was going to marry, but she was really too old to leave her bed. She was lying in a bed and she couldn't stand up. And then they built a telepresence robot in the end who went to that party, and she was lying in her bed with a VR headset on and could see through the eyes of the robot. And I think she could even remote control the robot, so she could really walk around on that party. She could even hug her grandson and his new wife. And what I saw and heard about that is that she was really happy, because for her it felt like she was there as much as possible in that situation. And yeah, she seemed to be really happy with that. And I really think that's a potential we should use for the future. And right now people cannot leave their elderly homes because of the pandemic, right? And people are not allowed to go there. I think this would help as well a lot if they could meet in VR and at least be together in a room. Yeah.
And I think with this, we probably switch to the off the record part, and we have so we stop the recording now.